Came to believe, the spiritual adventure of AA as experienced by individual members. This is Sober Readings, Sunday edition. Chapter 2 continued. Chapter 2. Fresh Snow. Exposed to the fellowship of AA for over 6 years, I had known in that time 3 relapses, brutal and dismal episodes. Each increased my self-abasement and hopelessness. Sober once again, settled into a minor job, I learned that there was satisfaction in the accomplishment of even menial tasks and that humility, applied as teachability and the search for truth, could be a higher power in disguise. Then, unexpectedly, I was offered an executive job involving many responsibilities. I could answer only, "I'll have to think about it." Was I capable of staying sober? Was I really sober or only dry? Could I handle the responsibilities entailed and cope with renewed success? Or would God permit me to punish myself again? I called a woman friend whom I was sponsoring. We talked it over, and she believed I could and should take the offer. Her faith reassured me. I knew the stimulation of being able to feel dignity again and gratification just to be alive. This newfound sense remained with me throughout the AA meeting we attended that evening. The subject under discussion was Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Home in the privacy of my room, I had another shock, a letter from my sister. I had seen her last in a sheriff's office, where she had regretfully ended the family's long effort to help me. "Even our prayers seem hopeless," she had said, "so I'll leave you to fend for yourself." Now came her letter, pleading to know where and how I was. Looking out the window at the soot and dirt of the rooftops and then inside at the meanness of my room, I thought with bitterness, yes indeed, if only they could see me now. The saving grace was that I had nothing more to lose and naught to ask from anyone. Or had I? All my youthful ideas had been washed away by alcohol. Now all the dreams and aspirations, family, position, everything I had once known, came back to jeer at me. I remembered hiding behind the trees in front of my former home to see my children go by the window. Phoning my family just to hear familiar voices say, "Hello? Hello? Who's there?" before I hung up. Sitting down on the bed, I picked up the letter and read it again and again. In my anguish, I could stand no more. Desperately, I cried, "Oh God, did you desert me? Or did I desert you?" How much time went by, I don't know. Rising, I seemed to be drawn to the window. I beheld a transformation. The smut of that industrial city had disappeared under a covering of fresh snow. Everything was new and white and clean. Falling to my knees, I renewed that conscious contact with my God I had known as a boy. I didn't pray, I just talked. I didn't think, I just unburdened a heavy heart and a lost soul. I didn't thank, I only begged for help. That night, finally at peace with myself for the first time in years, I slept the whole night through and awakened without fear and dread of another day. Continuing my prayer of the night before, I said, "I'll take the job, but dear God, let's you and I play it together from now on." While some days may offer only a modicum of frantic serenity, 26 years later I still know the same inner tranquility that comes with forgiveness of self in the acceptance of God's will. Each new morning there is faith in sobriety. Sobriety not as mere abstinence from alcohol, but as progressive recovery in every facet of my life. With my AA friend, my wife for 25 years now, I have joined my family for a joyous reunion. We know a contented and happy life, in which my sister and all the family share renewed and stronger bonds of affection. Since that day, I trust and am trusted. Edmonton, Alberta. The next section is titled, I Wasn't Alone Anymore. I was in and around the fellowship for 3 years, sometimes staying sober, sometimes cheating, myself, of course, a little or a lot. I loved AA, shook hands with everyone at every door at all meetings I attended, and they were many. I was a sort of AA hostess. Unfortunately, I still had a lot of trouble with me. One member of my group used to say, "If you would just take the third step." He might as well have been talking Dutch. I couldn't understand. Although I had been an honor student at Sunday school, I had gotten far away from anything spiritual. At one point, I did manage to stay physically sober for 6 months. Then I lost my job and, at 54, was sure I would never get another. Very frightened and depressed, I just couldn't face the future, and my stupid pride wouldn't allow me to ask anyone for help. So I went to the liquor store for my crutch. In the next 3.5 months, I died 100 times. I still attended a lot of meetings when I could, but didn't tell anyone of my troubles. The other members had learned to leave me alone, because they felt helpless, and I understand now how they felt. One morning, I awoke with a decision to stay in bed all day. That way, I couldn't get a drink. I kept that decision, and when I got up at 6, I felt secure, as the liquor stores closed at that hour. That night, I was desperately ill. I should have been in the hospital. At 7 o'clock, I started to phone everyone I could think of, in and out of AA, but no one could or would come to my aid. As a last effort, I phoned a blind man. I had worked and cooked for him for several years, and I asked him whether I could take a taxi and come to his apartment. I knew I was going to die, I told him, and I was afraid. He said, "Die and be damned. I don't want you here." He told me later he could have cut his tongue out and thought of calling back. Thank God he didn't. I went to bed, sure I would never get up again. My thinking had never been clearer. I couldn't really see any way out. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I still hadn't slept. I was propped up with pillows and my heart was pounding almost out of my chest. My limbs started turning numb. First my legs above my knees, then my arms above my elbows. I thought, this is it. I turned to the one source I had been too smart, as I saw it, or too stupid to appeal to earlier. I cried out, "Please God, don't let me die like this." My tormented heart and soul were in those few words. Almost instantly, the numbness started going away. I felt a presence in the room. I wasn't alone anymore. God be praised, I have never felt alone since. I have never had another drink and, better still, have never needed one. It was a long way back to health, and it was quite a while before people had confidence in me. But that didn't really matter. I knew I was sober, and somehow I knew that as long as I lived the way I believed God wanted me to live, I never need feel fear again. Recently, I was told that I had a malignant tumor. Instead of being afraid or depressed, I thanked God for the past 16 years of borrowed time He had given me. The tumor was removed. I feel fine and am enjoying every minute of every day. There will be many more days, I believe. As long as God has work for me to do, I will remain here. Quebec. This next section is titled, A New Man. I tried to help this man. It was a humiliating experience. No one enjoys being a complete failure. It plays havoc with the ego. Nothing seemed to work. I brought him to meetings and he sat there in a fog, and I knew that only the body was present. I went to his home, and either he was out drinking or he sailed out the back door as I entered the front one. His family was beginning to enter a period of real hardship. I could feel their hopelessness. Then came the hospital episode, the last in his extraordinary record of hospitalizations. He went into DTs and convulsions so violent that he had to be shackled to the bed. He was in a coma and being fed intravenously. Each day that I visited him, he looked worse, impossible as that seemed. For 6 days he lay unconscious, unmoving except for the periodic shakes. On the 7th day, I again visited him. Passing by his room, I noticed that the restraints had been removed and all the intravenous feeding tubes had been taken away. I felt elated. He was going to make it. The doctor and the floor nurse dashed my hopes. He was slipping fast. After I had arranged to have his wife brought there, it occurred to me that he was a Catholic and certain rites should be observed. It was a Catholic hospital, so I wandered down the hall and located a nun, the Mother Superior, it later turned out. She notified a priest and, with another nun, accompanied me back to the room. While the priest entered the room alone, the three of us decided to sit on the bench in the corridor. Without any prearrangement, all three of us bowed our heads and began to pray. The Mother Superior, the nun, and I, a Presbyterian ordained deacon. I have no way of telling how much time we spent there. I know the priest had left and gone about his other duties. What brought us back to the immediate present was a movement we heard from the room. When we looked in, the patient was sitting on the side of the bed. "All right, God," he said. "I don't want to be the quarterback anymore. Tell me what you want me to do today, and I will do it." The doctors later said that they had considered it physically impossible for him to move, much less sit up. And before this, he had not uttered a word since entering the hospital. The next statement he made was, "I'm hungry." But the real miracle was what happened to him in the next 10 years. He began helping people. I mean helping. No call has been too hard, too inconvenient, too hopeless. He founded the AA group in his town, and he is embarrassed if you mention this to others or comment on the amount of AA work he's doing. He is not the same man I was trying to 12-step. I failed in all my efforts to help the man I knew, and then someone else provided a new man. Bernardsville, New Jersey. The next section is titled, Figure of Evil. It happened about 3 a.m. I had been in our fellowship slightly less than a year. I was alone in the house, my third wife having divorced me prior to my entry into AA. I awoke with a frightened sense of approaching death. I was trembling and almost paralyzed with fear. Although it was in the month of August in Southern California, I was so cold that I found a heavy blanket and draped it around my shoulders. Then I turned on the floor heater in the living room and stood directly over it, trying to get warm. Instead of getting warm, I began to feel numb all over and again felt death approaching. I had not been a very religious person, nor had I become affiliated with any church after coming into AA. But suddenly I said to myself, if ever I needed to pray, now is the time. I returned to the bedroom and fell to my knees at the side of the bed. I closed my eyes, buried my face in the palms of my hands, and rested my hands on the bed. I have forgotten all the words I said out loud, but I do recall saying, "Please, God, teach me to pray." Then, without raising my head or opening my eyes, I was able to see the entire floor plan of the house, and I could see a giant of a man standing on the other side of the bed, arms folded across his chest. He was glaring at me with a look of intense hatred and malevolence. He was the epitome of everything evil. After about 10 seconds, I saw him slowly turn around, walk to the bathroom and look inside, turn to the second bathroom and look into it, walk to the living room and gaze around, then leave the house by way of the kitchen door. I remained in my original position of prayer. Simultaneously with his departure, there seemed to be coming toward me from all directions, from the infinite reaches of space, a vibrating, pulsating, magnetic current. In probably 15 seconds, this tremendous power reached me, stayed for some 5 seconds, and then slowly withdrew to its origin. But the sense of relief given me by its presence beggars description. In my clumsy way, I thanked God, got into bed, and slept like a baby. I have not had the desire for a drink of anything intoxicating since that memorable morning 23 years ago. In my years in our fellowship, I have had the privilege of hearing one other member describe an experience almost exactly like mine. Did the departure from my house of the personification of evil symbolize the departure from my life of the evils embraced by alcoholism, as some think? Be that as it may, the other part of my experience symbolizes to me the all-powerful and cleansing love of a higher power, whom I have since become happy to call God. San Diego, California. And the last section of Chapter 2 is titled Drowning. Before my commitment to a state alcoholic center, I had had a dry stint in Alcoholics Anonymous. I know now that I had gone to AA to save my marriage, job, and liver, though no one could have convinced me at the time that I hadn't sought AA with all the proper motives. In 7 months, my liver got well, and I got drunk for 6 weeks, winding up at the center. On my 8th night there, I knew that I was dying. I was so weak that I could hardly breathe. My breath came in little gasps, quite far apart. If a drink had been put within an inch of my hand, I wouldn't have had the strength to take it. For the first time in my life, I was backed into a corner that I could not fight, cheat, lie, steal, or buy my way out of. I was trapped. For the first time in my life, I uttered a sincere prayer. God, please help me. I didn't bargain with him, nor did I suggest how or when he should help. Immediately, I became calm and relaxed. There was no flash of lightning or clap of thunder, not even a still, small voice. I was scared. I didn't know what had happened, but I went to sleep and slept all night. When I awakened the next morning, I was refreshed, strong, and hungry. But the most wonderful thing was that, for the first time in my life, that dark, mysterious cloud of fear was gone. My first thought was to write to my wife about this experience, and I did. Imagine being able to write a letter after the condition I had been in the night before. I am sure that some would classify this experience as an example of letting go and letting God. Not this self-willed character. I had held on to the thin strand of my will until it just snapped, and then I was caught up by the everlasting arms. I had to be rendered helpless, just like a drowning man who fights his rescuer. I returned to AA, but I was reluctant for a long time to tell of my experience. I was afraid that no one would believe me and that they would laugh. Later, I learned that others had had similar experiences. A spiritual experience, I think, is what God does for a man when the man is completely helpless to do it for himself. A spiritual awakening is what a man does through his willingness to have his life transformed by following a proven program of spiritual growth, and this is a never-ending venture. Raleigh, North Carolina. That's the end of Chapter 2 from the book Came to Believe. Next Sunday, I'll begin reading Chapter 3. Until then, don't drink, go to a meeting, and have a great day. And as my friend Larry always says, best day ever. Thanks for listening.